The gunshot that shattered the morning silence sent Rachel Jensen stumbling through the scrub brush of northern Texas, her tattered dress catching on thorns as she ran from the smoldering remains of what had been her family's wagon. Behind her, the outlaws who had killed her father and stolen everything they owned were likely celebrating their spoils, never thinking twice about the young woman who had managed to slip away into the dawn mist. Her feet, wrapped in strips of cloth that had once been a petticoat, left bloody prints on the rocky ground as she pushed forward, knowing that stopping meant death in this unforgiving land. Rachel had no idea how long she walked. The sun climbed high overhead, turning the Texas plains into a furnace that sapped what little strength remained in her body. She was 20 years old, orphaned now, with nothing but the rags on her back and a determination born of pure survival instinct. Her mother had died of fever 2 years ago in Missouri, and her father had convinced her that Texas held opportunity for those brave enough to seek it. They had been 3 days outside of Red River, headed toward the town where her father hoped to start a freight business, when the attack came. The landscape blurred before her eyes as dehydration and exhaustion took their toll. She stumbled over a stone and fell hard, tasting dust and blood. For a moment, she considered simply lying there and letting the buzzards have their way. But something in her refused to surrender. Her mother had always said the Jensen women were made of iron, and Rachel would prove it true or die trying. She forced herself to stand, swaying like a sapling in a storm. In the distance, she thought she saw a structure. At first, she assumed it was a mirage, another cruel trick of the desert heat. But as she staggered forward, it solidified into reality. A ranch house, modest but well-maintained, with a barn and corrals visible beyond it. Smoke rose from the chimney, proof of human habitation. Rachel's vision narrowed to a tunnel focused solely on that door. 1 foot in front of the other. Do not fall. Do not stop. The distance seemed impossibly far, yet somehow her body kept moving, driven by instinct alone. When she finally reached the wooden steps leading up to the porch, her legs gave out completely. She collapsed against the door, her weight causing it to rattle in its frame. Inside, Zachary Ortiz had been cleaning his rifle when he heard the thump. He lived alone on this ranch 5 miles outside Red River, preferring the company of his horses and cattle to the noise of town. At 28, he had built this place from nothing, claiming the land and working it until it turned profitable. He was not expecting visitors, especially not on a Tuesday morning when most folks were busy with their own concerns. When he opened the door, he had to look down to see her. The woman had crumpled into a heap on his porch, her dress so torn and filthy that he could barely make out its original color. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever pins had once held it, falling in tangled waves across her face. But what struck him most were her hands, scraped raw and bleeding, clutching at the doorframe as if it were salvation itself. "Good Lord," Zachary breathed, dropping to one knee beside her. He touched her shoulder gently, feeling how thin she had become beneath the rags. "Madam, can you hear me?" Rachel's eyes fluttered open. They were blue, he noticed, the color of a clear Texas sky. They focused on his face with difficulty, and her cracked lips moved as if trying to form words. "Water," she finally managed, the sound barely a whisper. Zachary did not hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised at how little she weighed, and carried her inside. He laid her on his sofa, the only piece of real furniture in his front room besides a table and chairs he had built himself. His home was simple but clean, the dwelling of a man who took pride in what he had created. He brought water in a tin cup, supporting her head as she drank. "Slow," he cautioned when she tried to gulp it down. "You will make yourself sick." Rachel forced herself to sip, though every fiber of her being screamed for more. The water was cool and sweet, the best thing she had ever tasted. When the cup was empty, she met his eyes properly for the first time. Zachary Ortiz was tall and lean, with dark hair and eyes that held both kindness and wariness. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but he could not have been much older than 30. He wore simple rancher's clothes, a blue shirt rolled to the elbows and denim pants with boots that had seen plenty of use. "Thank you," Rachel said, her voice still rough. "They killed my father, took everything. I walked I do not know how far." His jaw tightened. "Outlaws," she nodded. "3 men, maybe more. I ran when the shooting started. My father told me to run." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not fall apart now, not when she had made it this far. Zachary set the cup aside and studied her with concern. "You are safe here. Let me get you something to eat, and then we will figure out what to do next." He went to his small kitchen and began assembling food. Rachel watched him move around the space with efficient grace, a man comfortable in his own domain. He returned with bread, butter, cold chicken, and cheese along with more water. "Eat slowly," he advised again, sitting in the chair across from her. "Your stomach will not thank you if you rush." Rachel took his advice, though it required enormous willpower. The food was simple but good, and she could feel strength returning to her body with each bite. Between mouthfuls, she studied her surroundings. The house was small, perhaps 3 rooms total, but it felt solid and safe. Through the window, she could see the barn and beyond that, endless stretches of prairie. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes, madam. Name is Zachary Ortiz. I run cattle, some horses. Nothing fancy, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice, the pride of a man who had built something from nothing. "Rachel Jensen," she replied. "My father and I were headed to Red River. He planned to start a freight business." Her voice caught. "He had saved for years." Zachary leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I am sorry for your loss. When did this happen?" "This morning, I think. Maybe yesterday. I lost track of time." She looked down at her hands, seeing the damage properly for the first time. They looked like they belonged to someone else, someone who had clawed their way through hell. "We should get the sheriff," Zachary said. "He can organize a posse, track these men." Rachel shook her head. "They will be long gone by now, and what would I tell him? I saw 3 men in the dark. I could not identify them if they stood before me." Bitterness crept into her tone. "My father is dead, our wagon is burned, and I have nothing, not even shoes." Zachary was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to a chest against the wall. He opened it and pulled out a quilt, soft and well made. "My mother's work," he explained, bringing it to her. "She passed 5 years ago. You should rest. We can talk more when you have slept." "I cannot impose on your hospitality," Rachel protested, though exhaustion was already pulling at her. "You are not imposing. You are surviving." He spread the quilt over her. "Rest. When you wake, we will figure things out." Rachel wanted to argue, but her body had other ideas. The moment she laid her head back against the sofa's worn cushion, sleep claimed her like a tide pulling her under. Zachary stood watching her for a long moment. Even covered in dust and suffering, he could see she was beautiful. But more than that, there was a strength in her face, a determination that had carried her through horrors that would have broken someone weaker. He found himself wondering about her story, about the life she had lived before this tragedy. He stepped outside, needing air and space to think. The morning was wearing into afternoon, the heat building steadily. His horses needed tending, and there were a dozen chores demanding attention. But his mind kept returning to the woman sleeping in his house, and the look in her eyes when she said she had nothing. Zachary Ortiz understood having nothing. He had come to Texas, 8 years ago with exactly $20 and a determination to make something of himself. His father, a vaquero who had worked ranches all his life, had taught him everything about horses and cattle. When both parents died within months of each other, Zachary had taken his small inheritance and headed west, looking for land and opportunity. Red River had been a dusty collection of buildings when he arrived. Now it was a proper town with a bank, a general store, a hotel, and even a church. Zachary had claimed his land through the Homestead Act, working from dawn to dusk to prove his claim and build his ranch. It was not much compared to the massive spreads owned by men who had come to Texas with money, but it was his, earned through sweat and determination. He had never married, though there had been opportunities. The truth was, he had been too focused on building his ranch to think much about companionship. There were women in town who made their interest clear, but none had captured his attention enough to pursue. He had always figured marriage would come when the time was right. Now, looking back toward his house where a stranger slept under his mother's quilt, he felt something shift inside him. It was not love, not yet, but it was recognition. This woman, Rachel Jensen, had fought to survive. She had lost everything and still kept moving forward. That was the kind of strength he respected. The afternoon passed in a blur of work. Zachary fed the horses, checked the cattle in the near pasture, and repaired a section of fence that had been knocked loose in the previous week's storm. All the while, part of his attention remained on the house, wondering if Rachel had woken yet. When he finally returned as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, he found her sitting up, the quilt wrapped around her shoulders. She had tried to clean her face with water from the pitcher he kept on the side table, and he could see her features more clearly now. She was young, probably early 20s, with fine bones and those remarkable blue eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked, setting his hat on the hook by the door. "Better, sore but better." She attempted a smile. "I should not have slept so long. I have imposed enough." "You have not imposed at all." Zachary moved to the kitchen area. "I am going to make dinner, nothing fancy, but there will be enough for two." Rachel stood, swaying slightly. "Let me help." "Please, I cannot just sit here and be waited on." He started to protest, then saw the determination in her face. She needed to feel useful, to do something other than be a victim. He understood that. "All right. Can you peel potatoes?" "I can." They worked together in the small kitchen, an oddly comfortable silence settling between them. Rachel peeled potatoes while Zachary prepared steaks from the beef he had butchered the previous week. She moved carefully, favoring her injured hands, but she did not complain. "Tell me about Red River," Rachel said after a while. "What is the town like?" "Growing," Zachary replied, stoking the fire in the stove. "When I arrived 8 years ago, it was barely more than a trading post. Now we have got proper buildings, a school that opened last year, even a newspaper. The railroad is talking about extending a line through here, which would change everything." "And people, is it a good town?" He considered the question. "Mostly. You have got your share of drifters and troublemakers, but the core families are solid. The sheriff, Tom Carter, is a fair man. The banker, unfortunately, is less so. Charges interest rates that ought to be illegal. But the general store owner, Mrs. Patterson, is honest and kind. Her husband runs the livery. You go into town often, once a week for supplies, sometimes for church on Sunday." He glanced at her. "I am not much for socializing, but I believe in supporting the community." Rachel nodded, understanding. "My father was the same way. He said a town was only as good as the people willing to invest in it." Her voice wavered slightly. "He had such plans." Zachary set down the knife he had been using to slice bread. "Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." She turned to face him, wariness in her eyes. "What is it?" What are your plans? Do you have family somewhere? People who would take you in?" The question hung in the air between them. Rachel's hand stilled on the potato she had been peeling. "No," she said finally. "My mother was an only child, and her parents died when I was young. My father had a brother, but they had not spoken in 15 years. I do not even know where he is." She set the potato down. "I have no one, nothing." Zachary had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made his decision easier. "Then stay here." Rachel's eyes widened. "What? Stay here?" he repeated, meeting her gaze steadily. "I have room and I could use the help." "A ranch does not run itself. You can earn your keep and it will give you time to figure out what comes next." "I cannot," Rachel protested. "You are a single man. I am a single woman. It would not be proper. The town would talk." "The town talks anyway," Zachary said with a shrug. "But if it bothers you, we can find a solution. Maybe you can stay in the barn loft. I've got it fixed up nice for storage, but it could work as living quarters. Or we can ask Mrs. Patterson if she knows of anyone in town looking for help. But Rachel, I am not turning you out with nothing. You will never go hungry again, not while I have food to share." The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction, made Rachel's eyes fill with tears. This stranger was offering her more kindness than she had any right to expect. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for someone you do not even know?" Zachary was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because someone helped me once, when I needed it most. When my parents died and I came to Texas with almost nothing, a rancher named Samuel took me in for 6 months. He taught me the land, helped me file my claim, and never asked for anything in return. He said the only payment he wanted was for me to help someone else when I had the chance." He smiled slightly. "I guess this is my chance." Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I do not know what to say. Say you will stay, at least until you are healed and have time to make a proper plan." His dark eyes were warm with sincerity. "I promise you will be safe here. I will not take advantage or expect anything improper. You have my word as a gentleman." "You barely know me," Rachel said. "What if I am a terrible cook or lazy or prone to causing trouble?" That actually made Zachary laugh, a rich sound that filled the small kitchen. "Somehow I doubt any of those things. You walked through hell to survive. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Rachel felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of fear and tension that had been there since the moment the outlaws attacked. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a glimmer of hope. "All right," she said softly. "I will stay, but only until I can figure out how to support myself properly. I will not be a burden. Deal?" Zachary offered his hand and Rachel shook it, feeling the calluses that marked him as a working man. His grip was firm but gentle, mindful of her injuries. They finished preparing dinner together, and when they sat down to eat, Rachel found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected. Zachary was easy to talk to, asking questions about her life before the tragedy and sharing stories about his own experiences on the ranch. He had a dry sense of humor that made her smile despite everything she had been through. After dinner, Zachary showed her around the property in the fading light. The barn was well built and organized, with 4 horses in the stalls and space for equipment and supplies. The loft he had mentioned was accessed by a sturdy ladder and was indeed spacious, with a window that overlooked the prairie. "I can set up a bed here," Zachary said. "It is not fancy, but it is private and secure. We can get you proper clothes from town tomorrow and whatever else you need." Rachel looked around the loft, imagining it as a temporary home. "It is perfect," she said. "Truly." That night, Zachary worked by lamplight to make the loft comfortable. He brought up a mattress he had in storage, along with clean sheets and blankets. Rachel insisted on helping despite his protests, and together they created a cozy space that felt almost homey. "There is a lock on the barn door," Zachary pointed out. "You can secure it from the inside if you want, and if you need anything during the night, the house is right there. Do not hesitate to come get me." "Thank you," Rachel said, meaning it with her whole heart, "for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I truly cannot express how grateful I am." "You do not have to keep thanking me," Zachary replied. "Just get some rest. Tomorrow we will go into town and get you situated properly." After he left, Rachel lay on the mattress, staring up at the wooden beams of the barn roof. The night sounds of the prairie filtered through the window, crickets and distant coyotes and the soft movements of the horses below. It was so different from the terror of the previous night, so peaceful and safe. She thought about Zachary Ortiz, this unexpected savior who had appeared just when she needed help most. He was unlike any man she had known before. Her father had been loud and boisterous, full of big plans and bigger dreams. Zachary was quiet and steady, a man who had built his life through patient determination. There was a strength in him that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with character. Rachel fell asleep thinking about his words. "You will never go hungry again." It was a promise, and somehow she knew he would keep it. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Rachel woke to the sound of Zachary working below, feeding the horses and mucking out stalls. She climbed down the ladder, still wearing the tattered dress that was all she had. "Morning," Zachary greeted her. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in a long time," Rachel admitted. "What can I do to help?" Over the next few hours, Zachary taught her the morning routine. How to feed the horses, which ones were gentle and which were skittish, where he kept the different types of grain and hay. Rachel absorbed it all eagerly, grateful to have purpose and direction. After breakfast, they hitched up Zachary's wagon for the trip to Red River. Rachel felt self-conscious about her appearance, but Zachary assured her that Mrs. Patterson at the general store was a kind woman who would not judge. The ride into town took about an hour. Rachel used the time to study the landscape, getting her bearings in this new territory. The land was beautiful in a harsh way, all wide skies and rolling plains broken by occasional stands of trees along creek beds. Red River came into view gradually, buildings appearing on the horizon and growing larger as they approached. It was bigger than Rachel had expected, with a proper main street lined with wooden structures. She could see the general store, a saloon, a hotel, the bank, and several other businesses. Zachary guided the wagon to a stop in front of the general store. As they climbed down, several people on the street stopped to stare at Rachel in her rags. She lifted her chin, refusing to show embarrassment. Inside the store, a plump woman with kind eyes looked up from where she was organizing bolts of fabric. "Zachary Ortiz, as I live and breathe. You are early this week." Her gaze shifted to Rachel, and her expression changed to concern. "Oh, my dear, what happened to you, Mrs. Patterson? This is Rachel Jensen. She ran into some trouble on the trail. I am helping her get back on her feet." Zachary's tone was matter-of-fact, discouraging questions. "She needs clothes and whatever other supplies ladies require. Can you help us?" Mrs. Patterson was already moving around the counter. Of course. Come with me, dear. We will get you fixed up properly." She took Rachel's arm gently, guiding her toward the back of the store where ready-made dresses hung on hooks. Over the next hour, Mrs. Patterson helped Rachel select 2 simple but sturdy dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, a shawl, and a pair of proper shoes. The older woman clucked over Rachel's injuries, insisting on adding bandages and salve to the pile. "Now, dear," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, "I do not mean to pry, but are you all right? Is Zachary treating you properly?" Rachel was touched by the concern. "He has been nothing but kind. He saved my life, truly. I would have died out there if he had not taken me in." Mrs. Patterson studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Zachary is a good man, one of the best, but people will talk, you know. A young woman staying at a bachelor's ranch." "I am staying in the barn loft," Rachel explained. "Everything is proper, and I am earning my keep by helping with the ranch work." "Good, good." Mrs. Patterson patted her arm. "Still, you be careful. Not everyone in this town is as decent as Zachary Ortiz." When they returned to the front of the store, Zachary was talking with a tall man wearing a sheriff's badge. Both men turned as the women approached. "Miss Jensen," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "I am Tom Carter. Zachary tells me you had some trouble on the trail." Rachel nodded. "Outlaws attacked our wagon 2 days ago. They killed my father and took everything we had. I managed to escape." Sheriff Carter's expression hardened. "Can you describe these men?" "It was dark and everything happened so fast," Rachel said. "There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. I heard their voices but did not see their faces clearly." "Which direction were you coming from?" Rachel told him what she could remember about their route, though the details were hazy. The sheriff took notes, asking occasional questions, but it was clear there was not much to go on. "I will ask around, see if anyone has seen suspicious characters," Carter said finally. "But I will be honest, Miss Jensen. Without better descriptions or evidence, it will be hard to track them down. These cowards usually strike and then scatter." "I understand," Rachel said quietly. She had not expected justice, not really. The West was too big and outlaws too common for every crime to be solved. After the sheriff left, Zachary paid for Rachel's purchases. She tried to protest, but he waved her off. "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said with a slight smile. They made a few more stops, including the bank where Zachary had business, and then headed back to the ranch. Rachel changed into one of her new dresses in the barn loft, relishing the feel of clean fabric against her skin. The dress was simple, a practical brown cotton with a fitted bodice and full skirt, but to her it felt like luxury. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Rachel broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Zachary, you mentioned I could earn my keep. What exactly did you have in mind?" He paused in the act of slicing vegetables. "Well, there is plenty of work around a ranch. Cooking, mending, gardening if you are inclined. I have been meaning to start a vegetable garden but never had time. The horses need grooming and the chickens need tending." "Chickens?" "I am planning to get some," Zachary admitted. "Fresh eggs would be nice, and maybe a milk cow eventually. Building this place has been a gradual process." "I can do all of that," Rachel said confidently. "My mother taught me to cook and we always had a garden in Missouri. I am not afraid of hard work." "I never thought you were." Zachary met her eyes. "Rachel, I want you to understand something. You are not a servant here. You are a guest who is helping out. If you decide tomorrow that you want to leave, find work in town, or head somewhere else, I will not hold you to anything." "I know," Rachel said softly, "but I want to contribute. You have given me safety and security when I had nothing. The least I can do is make myself useful." Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm. Rachel proved to be as capable as she claimed, taking over the cooking and beginning to organize the household in small ways. She mended Zachary's clothes, darned his socks, and started planning a garden plot near the house. Zachary, for his part, found himself looking forward to the end of each workday when he could return to the house and find Rachel there. She had a way of making the space feel warmer, more alive. Their conversations over dinner became the highlight of his day, ranging from practical matters about the ranch to deeper discussions about their pasts and hopes for the future. 3 weeks after Rachel's arrival, Zachary returned from town with a surprise. A dozen chickens in wooden crates. Rachel's face lit up with delight. "You got them. Figured it was time," Zachary said, unable to suppress a smile at her enthusiasm. "I built a coop last week when you thought I was just working on the barn." Together they released the chickens into their new home, a well-built structure with nesting boxes and a fenced yard to protect them from predators. Rachel named each one, much to Zachary's amusement. "You cannot name livestock," he protested. "It makes it harder when you have to butcher them." "We are not butchering the chickens," Rachel declared. "They are for eggs only. What about when they stop laying? Then they can live out their days in peaceful retirement." Zachary laughed, shaking his head. "You are going to make me soft." "Good," Rachel replied with a grin. "You could use some softening." It was a turning point in their relationship, that moment of easy teasing. They were becoming friends, genuine friends, and something more was building beneath the surface. Zachary noticed the way Rachel's face lit up when he came in from the fields. Rachel found herself taking extra care with her appearance, wanting to look nice for dinner. One evening, about a month after Rachel's arrival, a storm rolled across the prairie. The sky turned dark green, and the wind picked up to a howl. Zachary was securing the barn when he saw Rachel running from the house. "The horses are terrified," she shouted over the wind. "I think we should stay with them." They spent the next few hours in the barn as the storm raged outside. Lightning flashed through the cracks in the walls, and thunder shook the building. The horses whinnied and stamped nervously, but Rachel moved among them with surprising confidence, speaking softly and stroking their necks. Zachary watched her, seeing yet another side of this remarkable woman. She had arrived at his door broken and desperate, but in just a few weeks, she had become indispensable. More than that, she had brought something to his life he had not known was missing: companionship, warmth, a sense of home that went beyond four walls and a roof. When the storm finally passed and they emerged from the barn, the world was washed clean. Stars began to appear in the clearing sky, and the air smelled of rain and earth. They stood on the porch of the house, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. "Thank you for staying with the horses," Zachary said quietly. "You did not have to." "I wanted to," Rachel replied. "They were scared. Besides, you have done so much for me. It is the least I could do." "Rachel." He turned to face her fully. "You do not owe me anything. I want you to know that. Everything I have done, I did because I wanted to, not because I expected repayment." She met his eyes, and in the dim light, he saw something that made his breath catch. "I know," she said softly, "but what if I want to stay, not because I have to, but because I want to? What if this place, this ranch, feels more like home than anywhere I have ever been?" Zachary's heart hammered in his chest. "Is that how you feel?" "Yes," Rachel whispered. "Is that all right?" Instead of answering with words, Zachary reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and Rachel leaned into his touch. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. "I am falling in love with you," Zachary said, the words coming from somewhere deep and honest. "I did not plan it, did not expect it, but there it is. You walked into my life in rags, and now I cannot imagine my days without you." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I love you too. I think I have since the moment you said I would never go hungry again. You gave me hope when I had none, and you have given me so much more every day since." Zachary cupped her face in both hands and kissed her, gentle and reverent. Rachel's arms came around his neck, and she kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. It was a kiss of promise, of new beginnings, of two people who had found each other against all odds. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling. "What do we do now?" Rachel asked, slightly breathless. "Now," Zachary said, taking her hand. "We figure out our future together. If you will have me, Rachel Jensen, I would like to marry you. Make this official and proper so the town gossips have nothing to complain about." Rachel laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I will have you, Zachary Ortiz. I absolutely will." They spent the rest of the evening on the porch, talking about their plans. Zachary wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy more land if he could save enough. Rachel wanted to develop the garden and perhaps start selling produce in town. They talked about having children someday, about building a bigger house, about growing old together. "We should tell Mrs. Patterson first," Rachel said. "She has been kind to me. I would like her to know before the announcement is made public." "Good idea," Zachary agreed. "And I should probably ask the preacher to marry us sooner rather than later. I'm not sure I can wait long." "Neither can I," Rachel admitted, blushing slightly. The next day, they rode into Red River together, sitting close on the wagon bench. When they arrived at the general store, Mrs. Patterson took one look at their faces and clapped her hands together. "You are getting married," she exclaimed. "How did you know?" Rachel asked, surprised. "Dear girl, you are both glowing like lanterns. It is written all over you." Mrs. Patterson pulled them both into a hug. "I am so happy for you. Zachary Ortiz, you are getting yourself a wonderful woman." "I know," Zachary said, smiling at Rachel. "I am the luckiest man in Texas." Word spread quickly through Red River. By the end of the day, half the town knew about the engagement. The reaction was mostly positive, though there were a few disapproving whispers about the speed of the courtship. Zachary and Rachel ignored them, too happy to care what small-minded people thought. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, agreed to marry them the following Sunday. It would be a simple ceremony at the church, but that was exactly what they wanted. Mrs. Patterson insisted on organizing a small reception afterward at the community hall. The week leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Rachel worked on altering a dress Mrs. Patterson had given her, adding lace and making it suitable for a bride. Zachary cleaned the house from top to bottom and built a proper bedroom in what had been storage space, complete with a real bed frame and mattress. On Saturday evening, the night before the wedding, Rachel stayed in town with Mrs. Patterson and her husband. It was traditional for the bride and groom to spend the night apart, and besides, Rachel wanted to prepare properly for the ceremony. Mrs. Patterson helped her wash her hair and press her dress. As Rachel sat by the fire, letting her hair dry, the older woman asked, "Are you nervous, dear?" "A little," Rachel admitted. "Everything has happened so fast. Sometimes I worry that I am dreaming and I will wake up." "You are not dreaming," Mrs. Patterson assured her. "This is real, and you deserve every bit of happiness coming your way. I have known Zachary for 8 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "I love him so much," Rachel said softly. "Is it possible to love someone this much after such a short time?" "Love does not follow a schedule," Mrs. Patterson replied wisely. "Sometimes it takes years to develop. Sometimes it hits like lightning. What matters is what you do with it." Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful. Rachel dressed carefully, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. The dress was pale blue, simple but elegant, and Mrs. Patterson had lent her a pearl necklace that had belonged to her own mother. When Rachel entered the church, she saw that the small building was packed. Apparently, the whole town had turned out for the wedding. But her eyes went immediately to Zachary, standing at the front with the preacher, looking handsome in a new suit. There was no one to walk Rachel down the aisle, so she walked it alone, her head held high. With each step, she felt the past falling away and the future opening before her. When she reached Zachary's side, he took her hand, and she saw the love shining in his eyes. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They exchanged vows written by the preacher, promising to love and cherish each other through all the trials life might bring. When Zachary slipped a simple gold band on Rachel's finger, she felt tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews said with a smile. Zachary gathered Rachel into his arms and kissed her soundly, to the applause and cheers of the congregation. In that moment, Rachel felt complete in a way she never had before. She had lost everything, but in losing, she had found something infinitely more precious. The reception at the community hall was lively and warm. People congratulated them, offering advice and well wishes. There was food and music, and someone even produced a fiddle for dancing. Zachary, who claimed he could not dance, surprised Rachel by sweeping her around the floor with reasonable competence. "You liar," she accused with a laugh. "You said you could not dance." "I said I was not much for dancing," he corrected. "There is a difference. Besides, for you, I will do anything." As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch. Their ranch now, Rachel thought with a thrill of happiness. The house looked different when they arrived, transformed by the knowledge that they would share it as husband and wife. Zachary carried Rachel over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. He set her down gently in the middle of the front room, and suddenly the laughter faded into something deeper and more profound. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ortiz," Zachary said softly. "I like the sound of that," Rachel replied, reaching up to touch his face. "I love you, Zachary." "I love you too, Rachel. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a celebration of the love they had found against all odds. Afterward, lying in Zachary's arms in the new bedroom he had built for them, Rachel marveled at how much her life had changed in such a short time. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, running his fingers through her hair. "I am thinking about the day I arrived at your door," Rachel said. "I was so broken, so lost, I thought my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning." She tilted her head to look at him. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Zachary corrected gently. "This place was just a house before you came. You made it a home. You gave me a reason to build something bigger than just a successful ranch. You gave me a future." The months that followed were some of the happiest of Rachel's life. She threw herself into making the ranch thrive, developing a garden that produced more vegetables than they could use. She started selling the surplus in town, along with eggs from the expanding flock of chickens. The extra income was modest but meaningful. Zachary was thrilled with her initiative. Together they planned improvements to the ranch, discussing each decision as partners. When Zachary wanted to buy more cattle, he asked Rachel's opinion. When Rachel wanted to start making preserves to sell, Zachary helped her build proper storage shelves. Their partnership extended beyond work. They became each other's confidants, sharing dreams and fears late into the night. Zachary told Rachel about his childhood, about growing up the son of a vaquero and learning to love horses before he could properly walk. Rachel shared memories of her mother, keeping that beloved woman's memory alive through stories. They also began to talk more seriously about expanding their family. Both wanted children, and as winter approached, Rachel discovered she was pregnant. "Are you sure?" Zachary asked when she told him, his face a mixture of joy and concern. "I am sure," Rachel confirmed, taking his hands. "How do you feel about becoming a father?" Zachary pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Terrified and thrilled in equal measure. What about you?" "The same," Rachel admitted. "But I know we can do this. Together we can do anything." The pregnancy was not easy. Rachel suffered from morning sickness that lasted most of the day, and the Texas heat in summer made her miserable. But Zachary was attentive and caring, taking over more of the household chores and insisting she rest whenever possible. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a valuable source of advice and support, visiting regularly and bringing supplies and comfort. The older woman had become like a mother to Rachel, filling a void that had existed since her own mother's death. As Rachel's belly grew, so did the ranch's prosperity. Zachary had made wise investments in cattle, and the herd was growing steadily. The garden continued to produce, and Rachel's preserves had become popular in town. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure. On a warm September evening, as Rachel sat on the porch watching the sunset, she felt the first contraction. She called for Zachary, who immediately rode into town to fetch Mrs. Patterson and the midwife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Zachary paced outside the bedroom door, alternating between prayer and panic. Finally, as the sun climbed toward noon, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom, her face wreathed in smiles. "Congratulations, Zachary. You have a son." Zachary burst into the room to find Rachel propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at his child for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. As Zachary watched, the infant's eyes opened, dark like his own, and seemed to focus on his father's face. "He is perfect," Zachary breathed. "Rachel, he is absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Rachel asked. Carefully, Zachary took his son into his arms. The baby was so small, so fragile, yet Zachary felt a surge of fierce protectiveness unlike anything he had ever experienced. This was his child, his and Rachel's, a living symbol of their love. "What should we name him?" Rachel asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Zachary knew. "What about Samuel? After the man who helped me when I first came to Texas. The one who taught me that helping others was the most important thing we could do." Rachel smiled, tears in her eyes. "Samuel Ortiz, I love it." Little Samuel proved to be a good baby, crying only when hungry or wet. Rachel recovered quickly from the birth, and within weeks, she was back to her routines, though now with a baby strapped to her back in a sling Zachary had fashioned. Watching Rachel with their son filled Zachary with a contentment he had never known. She was a natural mother, patient and loving, singing lullabies as she worked and constantly checking to make sure Samuel was comfortable and happy. As Samuel grew, his personality emerged. He was a curious child, always watching everything with solemn eyes. When he began to smile at around 3 months, his whole face would light up, and both parents were utterly charmed. One evening, when Samuel was about 6 months old, Rachel and Zachary sat on the porch watching the sunset while their son played with a wooden rattle Zachary had carved. "Can you believe it has been over a year since I arrived here?" Rachel said, resting her head on Zachary's shoulder. "It feels like forever and no time at all," Zachary replied. "I cannot remember what life was like before you. Neither can I." Rachel watched Samuel, who had discovered his toes and was examining them with great interest. "Sometimes I think about that day, how close I came to giving up. If I had stopped walking, if I had not made it to your door." "But you did," Zachary interrupted gently. "You survived because you are strong and stubborn and unwilling to quit. That is who you are, Rachel." "I am strong because you showed me I could be," Rachel countered. "You gave me a reason to keep fighting." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. Finally, Zachary spoke again. I have been thinking about expanding the ranch, maybe hiring some help. The cattle herd is getting too big for me to manage alone, especially with Samuel needing attention." "That makes sense," Rachel agreed. "Do you have anyone in mind?" "There is a young man in town, Daniel, who has been asking about work. He is only 19 but hardworking and honest. I thought I might give him a try." "You are doing what Samuel did for you," Rachel observed, "helping someone who needs it." "I guess I am," Zachary said with a slight smile. "It feels right." Daniel joined the ranch the following week, and his presence made a significant difference. He was eager to learn and willing to work long hours. Zachary enjoyed teaching him about ranching, much as Samuel had taught him years ago. With Daniel handling more of the daily cattle work, Zachary had more time to spend with his family. He would often take breaks to play with Samuel, delighting in his son's growing awareness and personality. By the time Samuel celebrated his first birthday with a small party attended by friends from town, he was walking and beginning to speak simple words. The years passed in a blur of growth and happiness. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. Rachel's garden and preserves business expanded until she was supplying several stores in neighboring towns. They built a larger house with proper bedrooms and a real kitchen, though they kept the original structure as a guest house. When Samuel was 3 years old, Rachel discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Mary, after Rachel's mother. Samuel was fascinated by his little sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Zachary proved to be just as devoted a father to his daughter as he was to his son. He would rock Mary for hours, singing Spanish lullabies his own father had taught him. Watching him with their children, Rachel fell in love with him all over again. As the children grew, the ranch became their playground. Samuel learned to ride almost before he could run properly, showing a natural affinity for horses that reminded Zachary of himself at that age. Mary was quieter but just as determined, following her brother everywhere and refusing to be left behind. Life was not without challenges. There were droughts that tested their resources, and once, a fire that burned part of the pasture. But they faced each obstacle together, their partnership stronger for having weathered difficulties. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Rachel with a gift, a beautiful mare, gentle and well-trained. "I know you have been wanting to ride more," he explained, "and I thought we could start taking family rides together on Sundays." Rachel threw her arms around him, overcome with emotion. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "Not perfect," Zachary corrected, holding her close. "Just a man who loves his wife and wants to make her happy." Those Sunday rides became a cherished tradition. They would pack a picnic and ride out across the prairie, Samuel on his pony and Mary riding with Zachary until she was old enough for her own mount. They would spend the afternoon exploring, watching wildlife, and enjoying the vast beauty of the Texas landscape. During these rides, Zachary would sometimes point out landmarks and tell stories about his early days on the ranch. "See that stand of cottonwoods? That is where I camped my first night on this land. I had nothing but a bedroll and a dream. And now look at everything you have built," Rachel would say, pride evident in her voice. "Everything we have built," Zachary always corrected. "I never could have done this alone." As Samuel approached his 8th birthday, he began showing interest in the business side of ranching. Zachary started teaching him about managing cattle, about breeding and sales, about the economics that made a ranch successful. The boy absorbed it all eagerly, asking intelligent questions that often surprised his father. Mary, at 5, was more interested in the animals themselves. She named every cow, every horse, every chicken, much to Samuel's exasperation and Zachary's amusement. She had Rachel's kind heart and fierce determination, a combination that would serve her well. One evening, as Zachary and Rachel sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Rachel said, "Can you believe this is our life? Sometimes it still feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up," Zachary replied, taking her hand. "You know what I was thinking about today?" "What?" "The day you arrived. How you looked so broken but so determined. I knew in that moment that you were special, though I did not understand how much you would come to mean to me." Rachel squeezed his hand. "You said I would never go hungry again. You have kept that promise in so many ways. You fed my body, but you also fed my soul, my spirit, my need to be loved and valued." "You did the same for me," Zachary said softly. "I was surviving before you came, but I was not really living. You taught me what it meant to have a home, a family, a purpose beyond just working." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set in spectacular fashion. Samuel and Mary came running up to the porch, full of excitement about a nest of baby rabbits they had discovered in the barn. "Can we keep them, Papa?" Mary asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Wild animals need to stay wild, little one," Zachary explained gently. "But we can check on them and make sure they are safe." "Tomorrow, can we show Daniel?" Samuel asked. "Of course. Now I think it is time for bed, both of you." The children groaned in protest but obeyed, giving their parents hugs before heading inside. Rachel went to help them get ready for bed while Zachary remained on the porch, reflecting on how blessed he was. A few minutes later, Daniel approached from the barn. "Evening, boss. All the stock is settled for the night." "Thanks, Daniel. How are things going with you? You have been with us almost 8 years now. Ever think about starting your own place?" Daniel smiled. "I have been saving my wages. Actually, I have been meaning to talk to you about that. There is a small parcel of land to the east that is coming available. I was thinking of making an offer." "That is wonderful," Zachary said sincerely. "If you need a reference or any help, you let me know. You have been a good employee and a good friend." "I learned from the best," Daniel replied. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing but willingness to work, just like someone did for you, if I remember the story correctly." "That is right, and I hope you will do the same for someone else when you get the chance." "I plan to," Daniel assured him. "Good night, boss." After Daniel left, Rachel returned to the porch. "The children are in bed. Mary wants you to come tell her a story." "I will be there in a minute," Zachary promised, but before he went inside, he pulled Rachel close and kissed her tenderly. "I love you, Rachel Ortiz. More today than yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow." "I love you too," Rachel whispered against his lips. "Always." The years continued to pass, marked by growth and change. Samuel grew into a capable young man who worked alongside his father with confidence and skill. Mary developed a gift for working with horses, gentling even the most skittish animals with patience and understanding. When Samuel turned 18, Zachary made him a full partner in the ranch operations. It was a decision that surprised some in Red River, who thought the boy too young for such responsibility, but Zachary knew his son was ready. Samuel had his father's work ethic and his mother's sharp mind, a powerful combination. Mary, at 15, was becoming a beautiful young woman who turned heads whenever the family went to town. But she was not interested in the attention, more concerned with her horses and her dreams of breeding the finest stock in Texas. Rachel, now in her late 30s, remained as beautiful as the day she had arrived at Zachary's door, though she would laugh when he said so. Her hair had a few strands of silver, and there were lines around her eyes from years of smiling, but to Zachary, she had never been more lovely. The ranch had grown beyond anything Zachary had imagined in those early days. They owned several hundred acres now, with cattle, horses, and a thriving produce business that Rachel had expanded to include baked goods sold in 5 different towns. They employed several workers and were respected throughout the region as fair and honest dealers. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Zachary planned a special surprise. He had been working with the town to organize a celebration, inviting everyone who had been part of their journey. The party was held in Red River, taking over the entire main street. When Rachel arrived and saw the decorations, the food, the crowds of smiling friends, she was overcome with emotion. "Zachary, this is too much." "Nothing is too much for you," he replied, taking her hand. 20 years ago, you trusted me with your life. I wanted to show you how grateful I am for every single day we have had together." The celebration was joyous, with speeches and toasts and dancing. Mrs. Patterson, now elderly but still sharp as a tack, gave a speech about how she had known from the start that Zachary and Rachel were meant to be together. "I have watched them build a life from nothing," she told the crowd. "I have seen them face challenges with grace and celebrate victories with humility. They are proof that love, real love, can overcome any obstacle." As the party wound down and the sun began to set, Zachary and Rachel snuck away for a few moments alone. They walked to the edge of town, looking out over the prairie that stretched endlessly before them. "What are you thinking?" Rachel asked, leaning against him. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Zachary replied. "How different my life would be if you had not walked into it." "Our lives," Rachel corrected. "We built this together, remember?" "I remember everything," Zachary said softly. "I remember the first time I saw you, broken but unbowed. I remember the first time you smiled at me, really smiled. I remember the day we got married, the day Samuel was born, the day Mary took her first steps. I remember all of it, and I treasure every memory." Rachel turned in his arms, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "I love you, Zachary Ortiz. You saved my life, but more than that, you showed me what life could be. You gave me home, family, purpose, and love. You gave me everything." "You gave me the same," Zachary replied, kissing her forehead. "We saved each other." They stood there as the stars began to appear, holding each other close. From town, they could hear the faint sounds of the celebration continuing, the laughter of their children and friends. It was the sound of community, of family, of love that had grown and multiplied over the years. The following years brought new joys and challenges. Samuel married a local girl, Emma, whose family owned the neighboring ranch. The marriage united 2 successful operations and brought a new daughter to the family. When Samuel and Emma announced they were expecting a baby, Rachel cried tears of joy at the thought of becoming a grandmother. Mary, true to her independent nature, delayed marriage to focus on her horse breeding program. At 23, she had developed a reputation throughout Texas for producing exceptional stock. Men came from hundreds of miles away to buy her horses, and she ran her business with shrewd intelligence. Zachary and Rachel gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, letting Samuel take over while they enjoyed their role as elder statesmen of the family. They still worked, but at a more relaxed pace, taking time to appreciate the life they had built. When Rachel held her first grandchild, a boy named Zachary after his grandfather, she felt her heart expand in ways she had not thought possible. "Look at him," she whispered to Zachary. "He has your eyes." "And your determination, I suspect," Zachary replied with a smile. "Poor Samuel does not know what he is in for." As their grandchildren multiplied, with Samuel and Emma eventually having 3 children, and Mary finally marrying a horse trader named James and having 2 of her own, Zachary and Rachel's house became the center of family gatherings. Sunday dinners grew to include a dozen people or more, with children running through the house and yard. One evening, after such a gathering, Zachary and Rachel sat on the porch of the original house, which they had renovated as a private retreat. They were both in their 60s now, with gray hair and bodies that moved a bit slower than they once had, but their love was as strong as ever. "Can you believe we have 5 grandchildren?" Rachel marveled. 5. And probably more to come, knowing our children, Zachary replied with a chuckle. "We started quite a legacy." "We did," Rachel agreed. "And to think it all began with me arriving at your door in rags, desperate and terrified." Zachary reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become second nature over the decades. "You were never just a woman in rags to me. From that first moment I saw your strength, your will to survive. I knew you were special." "You told me I would never go hungry again," Rachel said softly, "and you kept that promise every single day. Not just with food, but with love and support and partnership. You filled every hunger I had." "We fed each other," Zachary said, "in every way that matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. The prairie stretched out before them, familiar and beloved, the land they had worked and loved for more than 40 years. "You have any regrets?" Rachel asked suddenly. Zachary considered the question seriously. "None about us, about our life together." "Sometimes I regret that you had to go through such horror to find your way to me. I wish I could have spared you that pain." "I do not," Rachel said firmly, "because that pain made me who I am. It taught me to appreciate what we have. Besides, I think we were meant to find each other, and sometimes the path to where we are meant to be is not an easy one." "You are probably right," Zachary conceded. "What about you? Any regrets?" Rachel thought for a long moment. "I regret that my father did not get to see the life I built. He would have been so proud. But other than that, no. Everything that happened led me to you, to this life, to our children and grandchildren. How could I regret any of it?" As the years continued to roll by, Zachary and Rachel became beloved figures in Red River. They were the couple that everyone pointed to as an example of true love and partnership. They supported the church and the school, helped young couples starting out, and were always ready with advice or assistance. When Zachary turned 70, the town organized a birthday celebration that was really a tribute to both of them. People stood up to share stories about how Zachary and Rachel had helped them over the years. There were young ranchers who credited Zachary with teaching them the business. There were women who talked about how Rachel had supported them through difficult times. There were children who remembered the candy she always had in her pockets when they visited the ranch. Through it all, Zachary and Rachel sat hand in hand, humbled and grateful. When it came time for Zachary to speak, he pulled Rachel to her feet beside him. "I am not much for speeches," he began, his voice still strong despite his age. "But I want to say thank you to all of you for making Red River the community it is. Rachel and I came here with nothing but hope and determination. This town gave us opportunity, friendship, and support, but most importantly, it gave us each other." He turned to Rachel, his eyes soft with love. 47 years ago, this woman arrived at my door in rags. She had lost everything, but she had not lost herself. I told her she would never go hungry again, and I have spent nearly half a century keeping that promise. But the truth is, she saved me just as much as I saved her. She made my house a home, my work meaningful, and my life complete. Everything good in my life comes from loving her." Rachel was crying now, and there was not a dry eye in the crowd. She stood on her toes to kiss his cheek. "I love you, Zachary Ortiz, then, now, and always." The celebration continued, but Zachary and Rachel slipped away early, preferring the quiet of each other's company to the noise of the party. They rode home in their wagon, moving slowly through the night, content to simply be together. At the ranch, they walked through the house they had built, looking at the photographs that lined the walls. There they were on their wedding day, so young and full of hope. There was Samuel as a baby and Mary learning to walk. There were pictures of the grandchildren, of the expanded ranch, of the life they had created. "It has been a good life," Rachel said as they prepared for bed. "The best," Zachary agreed. "And it is not over yet. We have got plenty of years left to enjoy." They settled into bed, and Rachel curled against Zachary's side the way she had for decades. His arms came around her automatically, and she felt the familiar sense of safety and belonging that had never faded. "Tell me the story," Rachel requested sleepily. "Which story?" Zachary asked, though he knew exactly which one she meant. "Our story. How we met." Zachary smiled in the darkness and began the tale they both knew by heart. "It was a Tuesday morning in June of 1874. I was cleaning my rifle when I heard a thump at my door. When I opened it, I found the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even though she was in rags and barely conscious. I picked her up and carried her inside, and from that moment on, my life was never the same." "And what did you tell her?" Rachel prompted. "I told her she would never go hungry again," Zachary said softly. "And I have kept that promise every day since." Rachel fell asleep with a smile on her face, secure in the love that had sustained them through decades of life together. Zachary held her close, grateful beyond measure for the day she had stumbled into his life and changed everything. The years passed peacefully. Zachary and Rachel grew older but never lost the essential connection that had bound them together from the beginning. They faced the challenges of aging together, supporting each other through aches and pains and the inevitable slowing down. When Zachary turned 75, his health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual weakening that worried Rachel. But he remained cheerful and engaged, spending his days playing with great-grandchildren who had begun to arrive, and sitting on the porch with Rachel, watching the world go by. One spring evening, when the air was soft and sweet with the scent of new growth, Zachary and Rachel sat in their favorite spot. The sunset was particularly beautiful, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. "This is my favorite time of day," Zachary said quietly. "When the work is done and I can just sit here with you." "Mine too," Rachel agreed. She was 73 now, her hair completely white, but her blue eyes were as bright as ever. "Do you remember our first sunset together, the night of the storm?" "I remember everything about that night," Zachary said. "That was when I first kissed you, when we admitted we loved each other." "Best night of my life," Rachel declared. "Mine too. Well, maybe tied with our wedding night." Zachary grinned mischievously and Rachel laughed, swatting his arm. "You are incorrigible. And you love me anyway. I do, so very much." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the sun sink below the horizon. As the stars began to appear, Rachel said, "Zachary, I want you to know something. If I had to do it all over again, go through everything I went through to get here, I would. Every hardship, every moment of pain and fear, I would endure it all again for the life we have built together." Zachary brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I feel the same way." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rachel Ortiz. You made me whole." "We made each other whole," Rachel corrected, as she always did. As they sat there under the emerging stars, surrounded by the land they had worked and the legacy they had built, both felt a profound sense of peace. Their love story, which had begun in tragedy and desperation, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. Zachary lived to be 81 years old, spending his final years surrounded by family and love. When he passed peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, Rachel was beside him, holding his hand as she had held it for more than 50 years. His last words to her were, "I love you, always." Rachel grieved deeply but found comfort in their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, and Rachel remained active and engaged, still running her preserves business at 79. She lived to be 88, long enough to see great-great-grandchildren born and to know that the legacy she and Zachary had built would continue for generations. She spent her final years sharing stories about their life together, making sure that everyone knew about the cowboy who had taken in a woman in rags and promised she would never go hungry again. When Rachel passed, also peacefully in her sleep, she was buried next to Zachary under a large oak tree on the ranch. Their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: Zachary Ortiz, 1846–1927, and Rachel Ortiz, 1854–1942. Together they built a life, a family, and a love that never ended. The ranch they had started with nothing but determination and hope remained in the family for generations. Children grew up hearing stories about their great-great-grandparents, about the woman who arrived in rags and the cowboy who gave her hope. The story became legend, passed down through the decades as an example of true love and partnership. The house they had built still stood, lovingly maintained by descendants who understood its importance. The barn where Rachel had first slept was preserved as well, a reminder of humble beginnings. And on the porch where Zachary and Rachel had spent countless evenings watching the sunset, their descendants still gathered, feeling the presence of the love that had created it all. In Red River, now a much larger town but still recognizable, there was a plaque in the town square honoring Zachary and Rachel Ortiz as founding families who had helped build the community. Every year on their wedding anniversary, the town held a celebration in their honor, remembering the love story that had inspired so many. But the real legacy was not in plaques or celebrations. It was in the family they had created, in the values they had instilled, in the example they had set of what love could accomplish. Their great-great-grandchildren ran the ranch with the same dedication and integrity that Zachary and Rachel had shown. They supported their community, helped those in need, and remembered always that they were built on a foundation of love. On quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Texas prairie in brilliant colors, it was easy to imagine Zachary and Rachel still there, sitting on their porch, holding hands and watching the world they had built together. Their bodies were gone, but their love remained, woven into the very fabric of the land and the family they had created. And somewhere in the gathering dusk, if you listened carefully, you might hear the echo of a promise made more than a century ago. You will never go hungry again. It was a promise that had been kept in every way possible, and it continued to resonate through the generations, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create something beautiful from nothing. The story of Zachary and Rachel Ortiz was not just a love story. It was a testament to resilience, to kindness, to the human capacity for hope and growth. It proved that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that two people committed to each other can build something that lasts far beyond their own lifetimes. Their descendants carried their story forward, each generation adding their own chapters while honoring the foundation that Zachary and Rachel had laid. The ranch prospered, the family grew, and the love that had started it all continued to inspire and guide them. In the end, that was the greatest legacy of all, Not the land or the money or the success, but the love. The kind of love that transforms, that endures, that creates ripples spreading out across time. The kind of love that begins when a desperate woman arrives at a door in rags, and a kind cowboy says, "You will never go hungry again," and means it with his whole heart. That promise, kept faithfully for more than 5 decades, became the bedrock of a family, a ranch, and a love story that would be remembered and retold for generations to come. It was proof that happy endings are not just possible, but can exceed even our wildest dreams when we find the right person to share them with. And so the story of Zachary and Rachel Ortiz lived on, a beacon of hope and love in a sometimes harsh world, reminding everyone who heard it that true love, when nurtured and cherished, can create miracles that last forever.